Hello and welcome to the 14th edition of Forbes India Leadership Awards. It's a very special discussion that we have lined up for you today with some of the members of the jury panel. It's my honor to introduce Harsh Mariwala, the chair of the jury, KVS Manian of Federal Bank, and Amit Chandra of Bain Capital. Thank you so much for taking out time today evening for this discussion, largely to understand what were the parameters that we focused upon when we were discussing the winners. Of course, we can't let out the name of the winners yet, but I can tell you that it's a very strong list that we have, and we'll reveal the names closer to the Forbes India Leadership Awards on the 28th of Feb. Let me start by coming to you, Mr. Mariwala. You focus a lot on corporate governance. You talk about how important it is to have governance as a foundation for a good organization. When you think about the changing dynamics of leadership in today's day and age, where there's so much of focus on innovation, on technology, tell me a bit about some parameters that you focused upon when you were deciding the winners across the 10 categories of Forbes India Leadership Awards.
So you started with governance and you went to what made the winners. So which one do you want me to start with, governance?
I want you to talk about leadership in light of good governance, because that was one big parameter that you focused
right.
on.
I think it's like a hygiene factor, governance. You know, if you don't have good governance, then automatically you are eliminated from the list. So clearly, I think as members of jury, we saw that whichever entry made the cut had high standards of governance, and anybody who had taken some shortcuts or was vulnerable to governance issues, they were eliminated straight away. So it's almost like a hygiene factor, and we eliminated some of the companies which had those perceptions about bad governance. Having said that, what were we looking for winners? We had different categories, so depending on the categories, we would give a little bit more focus on that particular category. It could be Entrepreneur of the Year, it could be Best Corporate Leader, but one clear thing which came out to me at least was that leaders don't give up, and they have grit. They have setbacks, but they know how to bounce back. So I think it's very important how the leaders have bounced back in spite of setbacks, and every person in this world has setbacks. So it's how you bounce back is very crucial. And they said that, you know, that self-motivation has to come from within. Yes. You don't expect somebody from the top to motivate you. So good leaders are self-motivated. They have this grit, which is a combination of passion combined with determination, perseverance. So we are looking at grit. And then while building the business, of course it is highly competitive. You will face competition. How do you continuously innovate?
Yes.
To be 2 steps ahead of competition is a very, very crucial aspect of any corporate leader. So do you create a culture of innovation? Do you create a strong right to win? And finally, I think in terms of talent, you have excellent quality talent, because there is so much you can do as a leader, but ultimately you have to be supported by very good talent, not only reporting to you, but down the line. So what is the quality of talent? Are they placed in roles which are leveraging their strengths? So I think these were some of the parameters we looked at.
Indeed. In fact, the regional Goliath, I understand from your stint at Marico, building Marico, as the founder of Marico, you did focus on some of the building blocks that go into being a regional Goliath. But tell me a bit about the Gen Next entrepreneur category. You as a leader did the very unconventional move of actually incorporating professional leadership at Marico and not necessarily handing it down the family line. Tell me a bit about what were you looking for in this particular category when you were deciding upon the next generation to take forward the family legacy.
I think next generation we had different options. There were some leaders who had been a part of a family managed organization. What individual role did they play in creating that delta in terms of their impact on the business was very, very crucial. It's very easy to say that, okay, I have inherited something which has been set up by my father or my uncle or somebody in the family. But the key thing is, after assuming charge, have I made a big impact on the organization? What has been my individual contribution? I think that was one critical factor while evaluating next gen leadership.
Mr. Manian, coming to you now at Federal Bank, of course, you have a ringside view of what's happening in India Inc. You have a very good idea of how retail loans are panning out. Tell me a bit about how do you look at all of this when you were looking at some of the key categories like CEO of the year, for instance. What insights were you particularly looking to draw upon when you were examining the entries in this category?
In general, I would say some of the factors that at least I had a bias for are, I would say, the audacity of the idea, in the sense audacity of the thought process or an idea. If it was a startup, it was an idea. If it was a CEO, it was the thought process of the strategy. How audacious was it? Of course, being audacious is the first step, but then how good is the sustainable execution post that idea? Again, that is very critical, because you can have great ideas, but good execution always is very important. So good execution was another important criteria, because good execution lends sustainability to that idea, right? And in some cases, I also kept in mind the scalability of that idea, because niche ideas are great, but in many of the cases that we saw, the reasonable relevant scale is very important, and therefore scalability of the idea is very important, or scalability of execution is very important. And in some of those, scalability included the ability to go beyond domestic markets, go global, and things like that. So I would say some of these played a role in of course, there were other things Harsh mentioned about that were important, but I would say a mix, depending on the category, the weightage to this thought may change, the factors may change, but broadly I would say these were 3-4 things that were in my mind when I was looking at the evaluating the candidates.
So in light of the changing dynamics, there's disruption, there's technology. It's all about how companies actually try and align with these new forces of disruption to bring about change. Tell us a bit about the CEO of the year you spoke about. What about the entrepreneur of the year? Because when you talk about audacity of the idea, I think this was one category where this was strongly displayed.
Yes.
Tell me a bit about this, and also about the various startup categories that we had, that is the promising startup and the outstanding startup.
Both these, whether it was the entrepreneur of the year or the startups, audacity was definitely one of the big thoughts in the selection, because the whole thing begins with the audacity of the idea. So I would say in the two categories you mentioned, entrepreneur as well as startup, that was very critical. But in startups, the many of the startups, what I said, execution, again, scalability, these are very important, right? Startups need to scale fast. They need to make sure that they sustain that idea and are able to attract capital through their journey. And if their execution is not good, the whole idea can fail, right? And they can lose the ability to raise capital. So I think these, in both these categories specifically, and I would add in some of these areas, governance, where you started the discussion, becomes very critical, because many of these entrepreneurs, it's good to be audacious, it is good to be nimble, but as you grow, unless you build strong governance, the sustainability can come into question. So I would say actually the 4 thoughts that I shared quite snugly fit into the selection of the candidates on these 2 segments. Yeah.
Indeed. Mr. Chandra, leadership, you say, is a lot about giving. It's a lot about nation building. It's not just about aligning selfish goals with corporate needs. Tell me a bit about what you thought about the categories such as grassroots philanthropist. We had very interesting nominations in this category. Do share your thoughts about what made the winners stand out.
Yeah, Neha, I think those categories have, if you see the nominations, have evolved a lot over the last 5 years, and I think in some ways the pace of change is even more rapid than the changes we are seeing in the corporate world. And that's basically because how people are giving back in India is actually changing very rapidly. First of all, we are seeing younger people give back, both more aggressively in terms of their money as a percentage of their income. Secondly, we are seeing them give back a lot more of their time in terms of their engagement, because this country is filled with incredible, incredibly talented people. And if they start applying their minds to the problems that we face as a society, then I think we can see dramatic change. And the third and most important facet is that for a long time, while many Indians and corporate houses we gave to direct change, i.e. we built a school, we built a hospital, we had a foundation that did some direct work. But now what we are beginning to see the new generation of givers do is they're actually thinking of systemic change and how to work with governments to actually change the lives of millions and in some cases tens of millions of people through their theory of change. And what you will see in the categories is the change makers actually bring all of this alive. And I think that's really exciting, because by appreciating these people for what they are doing, we will actually inspire many, many more to come forward.
Indeed. In fact, at Forbes India Leadership, we have a very interesting category, which is Institution Builder, where we focus on heroes who help the nation go forward, who help the cause of development. This year, again, we had some very interesting nominations. Tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, I love that award. I don't love it simply because who's going to get it. But I love it because that award in many ways, exemplifies everything that I just spoke about, but also in many ways touches upon all the points that both Harsh and Manian spoke about earlier. It's about, the spirit of excellence in what you want to achieve. It's about perseverance, because, you want to achieve everything you want to achieve despite all the ups and downs, more downs than ups, and be at it. And it's about actually trying to do that across a breadth of really important cause areas. And the awardee that you will see has really tried to do that, which is build both institutions and movements that touch the lives of people across strata and across India. And I've had the pleasure of seeing that awardee's work closely, and I'm very glad that that awardee is going to be recognized for it.
Indeed. Mr. Manian, tell us a bit about what does new age disruption mean to you? At Federal Bank, you deal with a wide range of clients. You deal with customers, retail customers. Tell us a bit about how you think leaders need to make use of disruption to get good outcomes.
Yeah. So, obviously everybody is talking about technology as a disruptor. The way I look at technology is both, at least in our business, it gives rise to huge opportunities, but at the same time it gives rise to huge risks, which are cyber risks and all those kind of things. So I think it's a very complicated issue, right? While it is an opportunity at one end, it's also the huge risk. So I think the best people who leverage technology need to know both the ends of the spectrum well, need to know to manage both the ends of the spectrum well. And maybe because I'm coming from a sector where this risk is relatively more enhanced, I probably am giving it more importance than the opportunity part. But opportunity is also, of course, a huge thing, even in our, for example, even in financial services, and for that matter, in many of the candidates that we saw even in this awards nominations. So I would say the best managers and best entrepreneurs and best leaders have to learn to manage both the ends of the spectrum well. And people who do that will really gain a lot.
Sure.
Can I come in here? Yeah, I think
Yes.
I fully agree with everything Manian said. I think one of the greatest ethical dilemmas for leadership in the coming decade is going to be how we really harness the power of AI in particular, and of course all the affiliated technologies. And we know that it's a very powerful tool, particularly for increasing efficiency and productivity. And productivity and efficiency can be increased by either improving the top line or reducing the cost of it, and that gives you the efficiency factor. I think one of the greatest challenges and opportunities, therefore, for leadership, and I believe this will be the ethical way for us to deal with it, will be to focus more on the former rather than the latter. Because if we, all of us as leaders, or most of us as leaders, focus on the latter, it will basically be a race to the bottom in terms of what it means for employment, for humanity, or for Indian. We care right now a lot about Indians. But if we actually think about it as an enabler for productivity for those who we work with, then I think we can actually think about how we can reach more customers, more markets. And I think we need to really approach it with that lens. And I think that's actually a switch that we need to figure out how we can get more and more leaders to make.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you brought up this point, Mr. Chandra, because the Turnaround Star, the category that we have at Forbes India Leadership Awards, had companies that have categorically done this and more. What were some exceptional items in this category that stood out for you?
Yeah, again, oddly, it was a company that I'm very familiar with for a variety of reasons. And it's a company I greatly admire because I've seen it from its real depths to the shining star that it is today. And it's not just in terms of its stock price, but every ratio and customer recognition. I think, again, the answer may not be that exciting because it fits into everything that Harsh and Manian laid out in terms of a framework.
Sure.
They laid their governance framework right up front and got that right. And then top of that, they brought in an exceptional leader who really focused on getting the fundamentals of the business right and dug in for the long term and took every issue and, thought about it and invested in making sure that the difficult decisions were taken up front so that the long term was glorious. And, it's actually, for those of us who've seen the story a little bit, both from the inside and outside, I think it's, you had to have a lot of conviction, but it's amazing to see it really play out. And today the company is not just well positioned as a great, Indian success story, forget turnaround, but as a great, I think, global play.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Mariwala, in building Marico, you have encountered challenges of various hues, and you've discussed it in your book as well in a lot of detail. Tell us a bit about what new leaders need to learn in the current context of disruption, where I remember in one of the earlier conversations you said that the challenges now are much more. The world is a lot more competitive. The environment is more challenging in several ways. How do young leaders actually brace up and thrive in this environment?
So you are absolutely right. I agree with what Manian was earlier saying, that disruptions can be ideas for opportunities. It could be a threat. And I think corporate leaders have to look at both angles. How do you nullify the threat? And how do you create an opportunity of that disruption is very, very crucial. Now, disruptions, of course, technology is the biggest disruptor. But in addition to that, the geopolitical developments is a big, big disruptor. In today's environment with US elections and whatnot, it's going to be a big, big disruptor. So how do you get that outside in? The leader's role is increasingly to see what's happening in the world, whether it's new technology or whether it's geopolitical developments or supply chain issues. So I think connected with the outside is how do you get the outside into the organization and not look internally, but implications of what is happening outside on your business is going to be a very, very crucial aspect of corporate leaders. Number two, we saw it in COVID that the overall development of, say, vaccines, which used to take 8 to 10 years, happened in 2 years. So agility has played a very, very important role. In a fast changing world, many times you don't need perfection. If you try to be perfect, you will get delayed long period. Sometimes you take a trade-off. Okay, I'm 90% sure, as long as it is not a safety issue like an airline, I have to take some steps and be agile and combine that with some degree of risk-taking and experimentation, because failures are a part and parcel of our lives. If you stop taking risk and if you start protecting yourself in terms of ensuring that everything works out to your advantage, you may miss out on an opportunity. It's okay to fail. Out of failures, you'll get many, many learnings. So I would sum it up by saying, get the outside in, be more agility. Of course, COVID has taught us to be far more empathy and all that. And then, what I mentioned earlier, that just ensure that the talent and everybody else, it's just not the top leader, but the whole team is looking at it from this angle.
It's interesting that you brought up empathy here. I want to come to you, Mr. Manian. What do you think leaders should do to build more trust in an age of disruption? There is so much of mistrust around artificial intelligence. Will it lead to job losses? How is it going to be used? The entire governance structure around artificial intelligence. Tell us a bit about that. How can leaders build trust in an age of mistrust?
Yeah, I'll start with a small kind of a instance where a lot of our marketing material now is created through AI.
Yes.
Yeah, but we make sure that we always write in every single advertising that we or promotional material we put down, we write imagined by humans, created by AI just as a philosophy. It's not the law yet in the country, right? But we write that always. I think it is about being transparent, because like Amit said earlier, AI can be used in absolutely transparent ways, and it can be used in transparent ways. What we have to make sure is, you have to be clear who are your stakeholders when you are leveraging something like an AI. It has humongous potential to enhance your relationship with stakeholders, and it has exactly the opposite also is possible, right? So I think transparency, I would say, is one single thing. Of course, there are many other things that you can do, but transparency, I would say, is one single thing which can help gain that confidence while using technologies like AI. Whether it is with customers, be transparent about the fact that AI is involved in that process. So also with anybody, employees, you can use it with all stakeholders. So if I have to name one thing, transparency.
Would you like to add to that, Mr. Chandra?
Yeah, I'm grappling with this question, to be honest with you, because all of this does mean much more uncertainty for the organization down to the employee. And so I completely agree with Manian that one needs to be transparent to all stakeholders, but I don't know whether transparency alone makes a individual less anxious. All of us fortunately are at a stage in our career where we can go to bed not worrying about what's going to happen to our jobs. But if you're a youngster graduating and you believe that your job is at risk with AI, I'm pretty sure that it's not easy to sleep at night. So I do feel that we need a better answer for younger folks, which is going to put them at risk, because the fact is, Harsh and his organization do a lot of work in mental health, and when I read the data coming out of some of the work they do and some of the work others do, our statistics on anxiety and depression are going through the roof, and I think technology is contributing to some of it. We don't have an answer for that right now, but I'm sure we don't want a world where everyone's anxious about what's going to happen to their jobs just because we have a great new technology. Technology is supposed to solve problems, not create them. So I'm sorry I don't have an answer to the question, but am I thinking about it? I'm trying to. I hope we come up with a solution soon.
May I add, Amit, you actually gave a good segue on this earlier when you said that it should be used more for revenue enhancement and cost rather than cost, right? And I think that's where even when you're dealing with employees, I think it's important to use AI at least as much as possible as an aid to the employee, improving his productivity kind of a model rather than a replace the employee kind of a model. I think that's where initial efforts have to be far more on that till there is confidence about how AI will pan out. But over a period of time, I do see, it happened with, let's say, in our industry, in banking, before technology came in, there were a lot of jobs people were doing, and now it's not that banks are employing less people today than earlier, except that the talent mix in organizations will change. So I think it's a transition process. Even the youngsters, they'll realize that newer talents are more employable, and obviously people will move towards acquiring those talents. So I think as long as we handle the transition well, even within each organization, I think this transition needs to be handled well, where initially it should be a productivity enhancer for existing employees rather than replacing existing employees. Over a period of time, as this transition happens, people gain skills which are different from what so I think future organizations will have a skill set mix which will be different from what it is today, like it is today compared to what it was 20 years back in most of our industries. So I think as long as we handle that transition well, it will be a good thing.
Let me add one more thing on the trust
Sure.
which she had talked about. I think transparency is absolutely important.
Yeah.
But I think transparency by itself is not enough to generate trust. I think you need authenticity. If you believe me, if I tell you something that I promised you to give, say whatever, some promotion after 1 year, and I'm just giving an example, and then you start doubting because I have given promises like that in the past, there is no authenticity. So authenticity combined with consistency. If I have said something, I will come what may, I will stay by that word. So authenticity, consistency, and transparency, I think they build in trust. And one other, at least when it comes to dealing with outside world, I strongly believe in under-promising and over-delivering, because the moment you over-promise, then under-deliver, people start losing trust in you. So in capital markets especially, we always believe that let's under-promise and then try and over-deliver. People will always think that I can trust this company.
So there's a very important point that was brought out in this, which is the fact that we are going through a transition, and how we handle this transition will determine a lot about the way in which companies actually deliver and whether they over-deliver or under-deliver. Coming to you, Mr. Chandra, do tell me about what corporate leaders should do against this backdrop to ensure that we can fast-track India's growth.
Yeah, I'm going to answer that question, and remind me if I don't answer that question. But before that, I'm going to make one more point in addition to, which is I'm an optimistic person, and so in response to your earlier question to me, I did not want to leave you with a sense of pessimism.
Okay.
And I'll tell you where I'm most optimistic with the advent of new technology. Look, we live in an India which has got three Indias. Okay, the same country with $2,600 per capita GDP has got about 200, 300 million people who live with $800 per capita GDP, which is close to sub-Saharan Africa, and SDGs, which are close to sub-Saharan Africa. So while we've had this great India success story pan out, there are vast swaths of people in a belt between Madhya Pradesh and Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh, etc., who really got left behind on a variety of development parameters. I think technology is actually going to provide us a unique opportunity to short circuit the time to improve outcomes for all of these people. I mean, I spend the first half of the day looking at how we can use AI combined with offline models to improve farmer outcomes by 6,000 rupees per acre for 350 rupees, 35 to 350 rupees per farmer. Now that's great. So that's farmer livelihoods. We've got about 80 million marginal farmers, which means multiply that by 4.5. You've got a lot of people who'll benefit from that. We know what our health outcomes are, and we know that already bots are outperforming physicians in trials 9:10. So we can really improve education, health, livelihood outcomes massively for 300, 400 million Indians who need it the most. And I think that's where the real opportunity lies for us in the next 10 years. Now, going back to your question, what do corporate leaders need to do? Look, I think it goes back to an answer Harsh gave right at the beginning. Our focus has been a lot on looking at the short term. You know, one of my favorite leaders I worked with for a long period of time, Mr. Kamath, used to say that we've got too used to QSQT, quarter se quarter tak, you know, when the movie, Amir Khan's movie had come out. I think we need our leaders to look a little bit beyond at the 5 and 10 years. DeepSeek did not come out of short-term planning. It came out of people looking long. It came out of things that Harsh talked about, you know, investing in innovation, in taking the long view. And unless we really invest, increase our innovation budgets, our R&D budgets, also unless some of our accomplished leaders say that I'm going to give some of my time, if not all of my time, on building the ecosystem, on fixing things that are broken, we will not see the India that we dream of. We cannot just leave it to the government to solve all these problems. The government is us. So I think it's very important, and that's the job of leaders.
Mr. Manian, when you talk about fast tracking the growth pace of the country, what are some areas that you give importance to?
So, the biggest thing about India is the diversity he talked about, right? So any idea to scale needs to be inclusive, right? It needs inclusiveness to go deeper into the overall population. If you play at the just the cream of the country, the idea doesn't scale. So I feel that more and more corporate leaders have to think about products which can be more inclusive. Of course, innovation will help in creating such products. I think creating products that are more inclusive and can address a much larger part of the pyramid is very, very critical. So that is one. Second, I think I go back, I'm sorry, I'm going back to it. I think our corporate leaders need to get more audacious. I think we need more audacious ideas. You talked about DeepSeek. I mean, it must have been humongously audacious, right? To think of taking on ChatGPT and stuff like that, somebody must have had the audacious vision to take on that. So I think you need more corporate leaders who are more audacious about what they want to.
What do you think puts a lid on this audacity of ambition, as you call it?
Yeah, so I think it is the, to some extent, maybe insularity. You see the world more and see what other people are doing. Probably we are a bit more constrained by our thought about, we think of scale in India, we don't think of scale globally. I think more corporate leaders need to start thinking globally, get more exposed to global way of thinking.
This is something you also said once in an earlier interaction, Mr. Mariwala, about how Indian companies actually need to chart global territories. Yeah. How do they do that? Tell me a bit, 4 or 5
before
areas.
I get into that, I personally think that, we are talking of $5 trillion economy, 10 trillion. It's only the entrepreneurs who will take India to the $5 trillion economy.
Yes.
Don't expect government to do a lot about it. I don't like entrepreneurs who go on blaming the government. Of course, government has its own issues. They will have their own sets of things. Sometimes things will work out well, sometimes. But you have to chart out your path, looking at what are the opportunities lying with you. Global opportunities because of technology, because of disruptions, and take that step. Of course, risk taking is there. Everything is not going to succeed. But unless you take risk, you will not succeed. And it's okay to fail if you want to de-risk yourself, prototype on a small scale, and then scale it up once you are successful. But I think the key thing is for entrepreneurs to be far more external looking, to be more risk taking, to have more ambition, and ultimately back it up with good talent, because your entrepreneur may have in his own mind, but if he doesn't have good talent down the line, nothing will succeed. And now, second question, what was your question, main question?
This was, you answered my question, which was about how companies can actually think global and what they can do to make that outreach.
I think, there is a lot of talk about manufacturing playing an important role in India's growth story, but I think if you really look at what India has been successful and fought out globally, I mean, where are we strong at? It's in the area of services, you know. And there is huge opportunity apart from GCC in terms of healthcare services and all with all the virtual world. There is a lot India can give in the area of services. So let's not just be manufacturing focused. I think services is one area where I strongly feel that India has greater opportunity, and we can never be competitive with countries like Vietnam and Bangladesh on garments. It's better to go into value added services where we already have talent, we have engineering talent, we have English. So why don't we leverage that rather than trying to do something which other countries have done well?
There's been a lot of thrust on PLI schemes by the government in previous budgets.
Yeah, but comparatively, I think on the services level, they've not given as much thrust.
What do you think the budget could do to address that? We are waiting for the budget 2 days later, so tell us what you expect the government to.
We are at a stage where, you know, there are going to be disruptions because of the US tariffs, whatever we may call their initiatives. The economy also needs to pick up in terms of employment. So I think government should do something which is pro-business, which can drive growth.
Mr. Manian, each budget is difficult. I feel this one particularly so because on the one hand, we are talking about fiscal prudence. We want the finance minister to stick to the path of fiscal consolidation, and we are talking about reviving the animal spirits of the economy. How do you think the FM can address both? You know, kill two birds with one stone. Is there some such tonic?
No, so I think it's a enormously difficult task. But having said that, you know, I don't think there is a choice but to continue the government spending for the time being, because, you know, there are two things that have driven our economy in the last few years. One was government spending, second was consumption, and private capex hasn't worked yet. So if you see, there is obviously a consumption side is lacking, as you can see. So there have to be some steps on that side, maybe at the personal income tax or things like that, where something to create more a bigger wallet for consumption. So I think that is one thing that I would expect something will happen. And second, I do expect the government to continue to spend. The government expenditure will be critical, capital expenditure will remain critical through the next year for sure. Having said that, I think something like Harsh mentioned, something to give more confidence to the business. I don't see much wiggle room on the tax side. I mean, you're already at 25% tax. I don't see how far that can go. So there have to be some other imaginative measures around how to create confidence for the private sector to invest and come back and invest. I think that easier said than done, but I would say measures will revolve around these three axes. One, capital expenditure by government continues, consumption, push consumption through maybe lower tax rates, and look for some measures which will give confidence to private sector to invest. I think these are the three areas where budget will focus, I think.
Just to take this point forward, Mr. Chandra, you mentioned to me that private investment is a bit of an enigma. Can the budget really address that? We've been talking about private investment not picking up meaningfully for a substantially long period of time. What can the budget specifically do to help the cause of consumption, to give companies the confidence to actually invest?
Yeah. No, you see, I think Harsh probably understands this much better than Manian and me. The middle class and below in India has unfortunately seen a squeeze on their wallets in the last, I would say, 5-7 years, and that's basically because income growth has not kept pace with inflation, with real inflation. Now, it's easy to blame that on inflation, and I think RBI has done everything to control inflation. But what would have been healthier is if we would have actually seen inflation, inflation and income. And the reason we have not seen inflation and income is essentially because we have not seen job growth at a reasonably fast pace. Now that's reality. So the question is, how can we spur consumption at this point of time? Now there are some short-term measures we can take, and then there are some things we can do, which is the long game. In my view, it's sensible to play the long game and maybe do a few things on the in terms of the short term. But generally the focus should be on the long game. In the long game, one should keep disciplined and focus on things which ultimately will create employment. Okay, be it the focus on PLIs, you can choose whether it's services.
Sure.
That's a different debate, or manufacturing, or whatever it is, but really focus on things which are job intensive, because there's no point of doing a PLI on something which, where you give 1,000 crore grant and it creates 500 jobs. So massively tilted towards job creation. We need much more urgent job creation in this country. So that, in my view, is the long game. And I also think fiscal prudence is actually good, because low cost of capital will help ultimately creating fresh asset creation. So playing the long game is healthy. On the short end, I do feel those who are most vulnerable at the middle class and below need something. And there my hope would be that would come in terms of some kind of income tax cut, and it can't happen in the budget, but some sort of realignment on GST. I think that is much needed, because we probably need to put back in some shape or form about equivalent of 5 to 10% of people's income back into their wallets, so that they have some cushion to be able to spend more.
So 2025, as both of you mentioned, will be a year of big changes. So before I wrap the panel, very quickly, in one phrase, tell me, what do you think is the big change that 2025 will denote? Starting with you, Mr. Manian.
So, in my mind, every year is a year of change. I mean, there is no year where it's not a year of change. But I do think that, this year is particularly important for the reason you yourself mentioned, that I think we are seeing a slowdown in the GDP. Yeah, I think we need to be decisively turning the tide this year, and this year will matter a lot. Otherwise, you have 2 or 3 consecutive years of declining growth needs to be arrested. I think so. I would say 25 is a year of urgency on that front. I think we need to turn the tide.
Mr. Mariwala?
I would say leveraging disruptions, whether it's geopolitical, technology. I think the key thing, whether it's government or private sector or public sector, how do you leverage disruptions is something which is going to be very, very crucial for this year.
Mr. Chandra?
I would say focus. This is the year where it will be very easy to be distracted, because as both Harsh and Manian pointed out, you're going to have many sideshows. You'll have events, geopolitical events happening all over, which have the potential to impact us, some cases directly, some cases indirectly. And while they have impacted us in the past as well, I think they will potentially happen with much greater frequency, and some of them will happen together, overlapping. And there will be a tendency in all of this to want to react, very quickly, and it's very important to make sure that you don't do something in the short term which harms us in the long term. So this is the year where all of us, whether it's corporate leaders or government leaders, will have to really keep, as they say in cricket parlance, their eye on the ball.
Eye on the ball.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Manian, Mr. Mariwala, Mr. Chandra. Thank you for joining us today evening. Grateful for your insights.
Thank you so much.